All right, guys, hello and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. I'm glad to be here in the studio with you guys again. Finally, I know it's been a little while. A little bit of updates for me. I have a brand new computer. Going to be looking forward to trying to produce content in a higher quality now. Maybe in the future, experiment with a higher resolution of the camera, experiment with different outlines and layouts for the channel itself, for the direction of the program. And we may also be experimenting in the near future with live streams. I want to look into also trying to do interviews and things like that. We're going to be entering into a new stage on this channel alongside with our, idea of trying to do a rebrand from the channel, going from entitled millennials to something like the Media Underground. That involves a whole bunch of logistics, maybe new music, new logos, all this kind of stuff now. All this stuff's still up in the air, guys, but just some updates on the ball that's going to be getting rolling. So jumping into this video here today, guys, we're going to be covering a couple of things. We're going to be starting, obviously, with this story that I'm sure some of you have seen headlines or content images of now. Where the IDF has been using drones, broadcasting the sound of crying children or crying women to lure people out of their homes in order to hit them with drone strikes. Pretty egregious stuff. I wanted to touch on that. Just because even in the endless slate of horrors that we have seen with this genocide in Gaza, this one is particularly egregious, another brazen war crime. With that, I want to get into an article from Electronic Intifada that outlines some of the violations of human rights and violations of international law perpetuated by the IDF, or as maybe we should call them, the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Forces. Going along with that, it talks about sort of the geopolitical and international political situation and how the U.S.'s unapologetic support, unapologetic covering and bending of the international law and rules really threatens to destabilize and maybe even down the line disintegrate the institutions of international law that we've really come to take for granted in the later half of the 20th century going into the 21st century. All right, jumping into some of our content here, guys, we have this article from The New Arab, which is a source we've used pretty frequently here. It says, Israeli army broadcasts baby cries and women screaming to lure and kill Palestinians in Gaza. Again, just horrifying, guys. Going into the reading here, guys, I have a few things highlighted for you. It says, the Israeli army is broadcasting recordings of women screaming and babies crying to lure Palestinians out into the streets of Gaza and kill them, a rights monitor has reported. This is coming out of Euromed Human Rights Monitor, a Geneva-based group. Said the technique was being used to intimidate and target Palestinian civilians in central Gaza Strip's Nusayrat refugee camp, which is currently under assault by Israel. So again, guys, another example out of how many examples now of not only indiscriminate killing and bombings and raids and things like that from the Israelis, from them in general civilian areas, but also in refugee areas. And now out of this refugee camp, we're not only seeing them, with bombings and things like this, we're seeing them luring out clearly civilians with psychological warfare in order to kill them, in order to kill civilians. Horrifying stuff. I really don't even know what else to say about it. It's like something you'd see in a dystopic science fiction movie where the robotic drone or whatever plays the sound of someone's child, crying in order to lure the rebels out or something and then kill them. And a lot of times these aren't even rebels. These are just regular everyday people. Going in here, it says, testimonies from residents who spoke to the team confirmed hearing sounds of crying and screams broadcast late at night on Sunday and Monday. When the residents went out to investigate and try to help, they were targeted by Israeli quadcopter drones and gunfire, the report said. The alarming technique was used with the intent of luring the camp's residents out on the street where they could be more easily targeted by Israeli snipers, Euromed said. That some of the sounds are often broadcast late at night when the streets are empty. The technique and noise is primarily used to bring people out to target them because at night no one is out. So, quite literally the definition of no rest for the weary. They want to keep killing even through the night. Maybe they don't want to use some of these specific kinds of bombs that would make a bigger mess. So somebody in the IOF had the brilliant idea to use a drone to lure people out into the street. And, of course, this isn't the first time we've heard of this level of, crime or horrifying psychological warfare. Obviously, we've had countless testimonies of the Israeli doing baiting for sniping, which is where, and they've used this on children, where they will put food or other items clearly marked in a street with an open line of sight. And obviously the U.S. military did this as well in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they will set this food and stuff out, and then people will come, and when they come for the food, they will shoot them. And then even on top of that, after they've shot them, and those people are crying out, a lot of times they will shoot them without the intention to kill initially, so that they're wounded call out, so that they can then kill more people who now are maybe wise that this is a trap, but even if it's a trap, are willing to try to help someone who is wounded out in the street, right? These are all things we've seen out of the IOF for many, many years. This is nothing new, but this, new tech side of this with the drones, this level of psychological warfare meant to maim the human psyche. It's really horrifying, dystopic stuff, guys. The Israeli forces find no one to target, so has resorted to this trick to deceive people. In the past few days, a number of people have been wounded because of this technique. Around 7 people, some of them were targeted in the head as they went to see where the sound was coming from. Euromed also found the tactic involved broadcasting the sound of gunshots, armed conflict, explosions, military vehicle movements, and at times even songs in Hebrew and Arabic in a bid to psychologically intimidate civilians who live in total darkness. What do you say to that, guys? You can't say anything. You can just... we've been covering this stuff for 6 months now, folks, and it's really almost amazing. It's horrifying that just when you think it can't get any worse, you read something like this. And what's even crazier is everyday people are still running flack for the Israelis, even as mainstream news media outlets like CNN and BBC are covering some of these horrors, like the Flower Massacre, which is, of course, where people were lined up to receive aid, food aid, and the IOF just came out with an armored vehicle and just started going and hosing people down with the machine gun. Still got people covering for them then. It's just horrifying. We heard the voice of girls and women screaming, "Come help me, I am injured." We went out to find out what was happening. No women were found, but we were directly targeted by a quadcopter drone, they said. I fled inside, and 2 people right in front of me were seriously injured. Because of the ongoing gunfire, we were able to treat them, so we called an ambulance, and they arrived to transport them. Al Jazeera's Gaza correspondent Anas al-Sharif also reported that Israel was using drones to broadcast sounds of children crying in central Gaza Strip. In a voice recording published on Tuesday, they repeated the sounds of babies crying with short pauses in between that could be heard. The New Arab could not independently verify the audio. So I will say, actually, guys, right before this, and I don't have it on here, I was listening to the weekly roundup with the Electronic Intifada. Again, I say this every time. If you aren't following the Electronic Intifada, please do. This is why I am becoming so well-versed. Probably one of the primary sources other than that and Al Jazeera and the New Arab, and just generally independent journalists from the region as well, obviously. But great resource. But I was just watching their weekly podcast that kind of goes through everything that's been going on in Gaza. And I actually heard that recording. And it's pretty haunting because you can tell it's fake. I mean, this sounds silly and maybe a bit disconnected to compare it to this, given just the horror that's happening. But if you've ever seen those like creepy pastas of where people say they've encountered a Wendigo or whatever, I like some of that stuff in my free time. I like to get a little creeped out. It's fun. But where the story of the Wendigo is that it can mimic the cries of your loved ones to lure you away from the group or whatever. The way that this recording sounded, just the way that it was paused, it was quite clearly artificial. It really reminded me of that, and it gave me even worse chills just knowing that its sole purpose is a tool to lure innocent people out to be killed. Pretty terrible, guys. But going into our next article here, we have quite a bit more from this one. We'll try to go through it relatively quickly because, again, I want to keep these videos short, how we have been. And I'm sorry if maybe this isn't the best video, guys. I'm getting back into the groove here after about a month of some weird transitions and personal stuff going on. Again, guys, this is from the Electronic Intifada, Israel and U.S. deliberately gutting international law in Gaza. So with this one, we are going to go through and quickly, some of the stuff is going to be rehashed of stuff we've done whole episodes on individually, clearly. An example being the story of the Israelis using AI for a targeting system, and how this may constitute a war crime. But we're going to be going through some of this. Some of it we've already discussed. But with the main synopsis being tried to get to the end here, where it kind of analyzes the ways in which the way Israel and the U.S. is acting, particularly the way the U.S. is acting to protect Israel, really threatens to destroy the already tenuous state and practicality or capability of international law right now, right? So let's go into this here, guys. It says, Israel and U.S. deliberately gutting international law in Gaza. Says, blatantly violating basic principles of the laws of war. Israel has deployed the language of international humanitarian law as a form of humanitarian camouflage, in the words of independent UN expert Francesca Albanese, in the furtherance of its genocidal campaign. In her new report titled, quote-unquote, Anatomy of a Genocide, Albanese says that one of her key findings is that Israel's executive and military leadership and soldiers have intentionally distorted jus and bello principles, subverting their protective functions in an attempt to legitimize genocidal violence against the Palestinian people. Jus and bello refers to the conditions under which states may legitimately resort to war. It regulates the conduct of parties engaged in an armed conflict. With its genocidal conduct in Gaza, as per analyst Trita Parsi, Israel is engaged in a deliberate and systematic effort to destroy existing laws and norms around warfare. He added, Israel is seeking to either destroy these norms or create a new normal in which it, much like the U.S., will be untouchable above these laws and norms. This effort was exemplified by Israel's actions on just day one, the 1st of April, in Gaza and beyond. Israel's forces withdrew from the vicinity of Gaza's largest and most important hospital after perpetrating what may be one of the worst massacres in Palestinian history. An Israeli attack destroyed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing 12. This is obviously a story that has really been going around now recently, because people are genuinely concerned that this could be the final series of catalysts that leads to World War III burning out into the region, right? And, of course, you guys have heard of what happened in Al-Shifa Hospital. For those of you who maybe haven't, Israel was raiding Al-Shifa Hospital for a period of 2 or 3 weeks. When they finally pulled out of that area, it was mass death. And it wasn't just, like, people wounded from fighting and things like that. It was people bound and bullets to the back of the head, women, children, patients, mass graves. I mean, it was Nazi shit. It was Nazi shit. That kind of war crime. Just another, attacking hospitals is a war crime. It is outlawed by the Geneva Convention. It is outlawed by the Rome Statute. Every single institution and NGO in the world recognizes that. And obviously the flower massacres, like we've talked about. And then killing, attacking a diplomatic premises, a consulate or an embassy is another war crime. And these are all just examples in the like it's saying here, the normalization of these acts threatens to completely throw out international law, to completely throw out these institutions that have nominally, and they are far from perfect and they are far from even effective a lot of times. But still, the purpose of the UN was what? To stop another world war, essentially, right? And whatever other ways it may have failed, it has managed in its own ways, piecemeal, this way, that way, to achieve that. And through the brazen disregard and the running a flag of the U.S. for Israel's genocide on all these different crimes, and the way the U.S. has blocked resolutions and stuff, it's really threatening to tell the rest of the world that this is pointless and there's no reason anyone should take care of it. Like, for instance, the consulate thing, that's not even just like the right thing to do or anything like that. That's just good for everybody. It's if you start attacking embassies, everyone's embassy in the world, it's just one of these things. It's give and take. You don't attack an embassy, because if you attack an embassy, someone else, then it's a green light to attack your embassy. I mean, this isn't even like a moral grounds thing. This is just an essential thing for the running of international systems of diplomacy and dialogue. And we're seeing the U.S. with it's covering a flag of what Israel did in Syria's, in Iran's Syrian consulate. Even that. But if the same thing happened to a U.S. or a European power, or even one of its allies' embassies, they would be up in uproar about it. So let's go on here, guys. Israel is crossing every possible red line, still with full impunity, Albanese said the following day. Sanctions now, indictments now, she said. In the absence of such accountability measures for past and ongoing rights violations, and enabled by decades of impunity, Israel's total war on Palestinians in Gaza is also a war on the principles of international law, the impact of which will surely be profound. And again, guys, like this article is saying, the point it's making is by running this flag, by allowing all these things to happen without, permitting, like the U.S. did not permit a resolution to go through, all these different things, we are paving the way for a future where there is no international law, or the international law that exists is just paved over like nothing, and it exists only as a facade of legitimacy as the U.S. tries to usurp actual international law with what it calls its quote-unquote rules-based international order. But going along with this and then rewinding a little bit into this article, I forgot to make this point to you guys. When it was talking about, the absolute horror, the absolute crimes, hellscape level crimes the IOF is perpetuating in Palestine. And the U.S. is bankrolling despite, calls from its own people for a ceasefire, a diplomatic resolution. It is creating a new normal, a new genocidal normal. And going along with the slow disintegration of international law that we're seeing as a result of this, the slow melting of U.S. soft power, we're looking at the U.S. and the Western powers, as well with a lot of the crimes that have been going on in Ukraine as a part of this as well, creating a new normal where genocidal war on people of the global South is normal. And this is terrifying because we know that the U.S. empire is in decline. The U.S. empire is in terminal decline for a whole host of reasons, that we have been covering on this channel since day one. If you've watched this channel at all, we have gone through all the ways in which the American empire is in a state of terminal decay. We have decadent Roman syndrome in this society, right? And as we know, when empires begin to fray at the edges, begin to collapse, they become like a wild animal backed into a corner. And with this, as we see international law being lampooned like this, and as we see genocidal war being normalized to the public, I mean, all of us have been desensitized by this horror in Gaza, myself included. Like, when I read this about the drones being used to broadcast the sounds of babies crying in order to lure people out to be killed. 6 months ago, I might have started crying thinking about that. Now, the only reason I covered it, like I said, because I knew it was egregious, was on an intellectual level. It's no longer on an emotional level because I'm so fucking desensitized from this, and I know you all are as well. But we're looking, as the U.S. empire gets backed into this corner, it is normalizing, it is manufacturing that consent for some of the worst crimes possible. And as we see greater power conflict beginning to emerge, i.e., the proxy war in Ukraine with Russia, i.e., the rising of tensions and, the military strategy of containment in regards with Japan and, AUKUS and Taiwan and the Philippines with China. We see all these things coming to an head, and Gaza is going to really have served as a normalization, as a desensitization moment in history to prepare for, and I hope not, horrible World War III level crimes, right? This is what we're looking at here. Israel has advanced its settler colonial project through military occupation and various repressive measures. According to Albanese, this has involved construing Palestinians as a security threat to justify their oppression and decivilize, namely the denial of their status as protected civilians. So again, this is an example, guys, of, and we're going to go through this, all the ways that Israel has taken international law and weaponized it in order to, and the U.S. has done this endlessly. This is out of the U.S. playbook. But to take international law, ideas of human rights, ideas of sovereignty, ideas of raison d'etre, whatever, in order to justify horror, genocidal horror, right? All Palestinian men considered terrorists. The international humanitarian law principle of distinction holds that parties to armed conflict must at all times distinguish between civilians and combatants, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Attacks may only be directed against combatants. Attacks must not be directed against civilians. Among those who have been killed, Albanese points out, 70% of recorded deaths have consistently been women and children. 70%. Israel has failed to prove that the men who constitute the remaining 30% were active Hamas combatants, a necessary condition for them to be lawfully targeted. And yet, she writes, by early December, Israel's security advisors claimed the killing of 7,000 terrorists in a stage of the campaign when less than 5,000 adult males in total had been identified among the casualties, thus implying that all adult males were terrorists. And, again, out of the U.S. playbook, after September 11th, we saw the long-standing caricature of the virile, perverted, domineering Muslim man, this Orientalism, this, shady Arab, this shady Persian, this trope, right? This conniving, brown person. We've seen this trope turned into absolutely dehumanizing rhetoric during the beginning of the war on terror, and we are obviously seeing that here in Israel. And going along with this is a dangerous, obviously, precedent that was set by the U.S. during that time period, but it's been really amped up in Israel because, we are seeing them create these free kill zones where any and all men, even teenagers, are automatically, due to their ethnicity, turned into terrorists. And because they are terrorists, they are a national security threat. And according to international law, we have a right to respond to to national security threats. So therefore, our genocide is justified, right? This is what we're seeing with this. Israel is considering a figure 20% higher than the number of adult men reported killed to be terrorists, suggesting that they may be considering all teenage boys as combatants as well. The figure is doubted by commanders interviewed by the paper, imply that the definition of terrorist is open to a wide range of interpretation. In practice, a terrorist is anyone the IDF, Israeli military, has killed in the areas in which its forces operate. A reserve officer who served in Gaza told Haaretz. So, straight from the horse's mouth there, guys. We're going to skip through some of this here. Moving on, this has obviously been in the news recently here as well. Pretty prevalent with World Central Kitchen. Aid workers killed systematically. As we know, we have had a record number of UN staff killed in this conflict. I believe the number is probably near 200 now. Along with that, we have seen a record number of journalists. We have seen more journalists killed in this conflict by the IDF. It's not by Hamas. It's by the IDF. It's by the Israelis. We have seen more journalists killed in this conflict than in the Vietnam War or in World War II. That's because they're being purposefully targeted. It's not on accident. It's purposeful. It's not like a mortar shell fell. Oh no, we killed a journalist. Well, so sorry. It's, hey, there's that journalist. Blow his head off with a sniper rifle. There's a journalist. Let's use one of these suicide drones to blow him up. Oh, he's with his family too? Good. Well, they should have thought about that before being married or being the children of a journalist. This is what we're seeing here. Again, another war crime, and it's being normalized, especially with the U.S. Running flak for them. The Israeli military killed 7 aid workers, many of them foreign nations, in a series of strikes on what they knew to be a humanitarian mission on 1st of April. Their drone-fired missiles penetrated the roofs of 3 World Central Kitchen convoy vehicles, the charity's logo effectively serving as a target for lethal fire. And this is pretty crazy. You guys know that they were hunted down. Like they, as we see here, actually I'll finish this little section here, I apologize. Various non-explanations were put forward by Israel in the immediate aftermath of the attack, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the aid workers were unintentionally struck and that this kind of thing happens in war. Going on, a rushed military self-investigation. Gotta love that. Let's have the Nazis investigate themselves. I'm sure there was no Holocaust. Eventually put forward various excuses, a breakdown in communications, a mistaken identification in the first strike, and one of the drone operators said in retrospect that the object thought to be a weapon may have been a bag. So all these different excuses, right? Israeli military sources, meanwhile, told Haaretz that the attack on the World Central Kitchen convoy was a result of a lack of discipline on the part of commanders on the ground. According to these sources, the commanders and forces involved acted contrary to instructions. So I'll just go back here and say what I'm trying to say. Some of you may already know this, but those people in the WCK convoy, aid convoy that were delivering food, they were like hunted down. Like they stopped and like entered new vehicles after being hit, but managed to survive. And then they were hit again, and then they tried to run, and then they stopped and like tried to get, and then they got hit again. And if you look at the pictures from that, there's holes right in the fucking logo in the top. Like they knew. It's not that somebody missed this. It was a clearly marked vehicle, and not only that, they had prior, World Central Kitchen had prior cleared this this relief mission with the IOF, and they knew they were going through this area at this time with this and that. I mean, come on, guys. And we have seen this constantly out of IOF. Complete disregard for international human law. Going on here, guys, I want to play this little video for you guys. Just showing, again, John Kirby, Matt Miller, all these guys running lies, running cover for Israel, and in the process, completely pissing on the international law that protects the global community and that kind of stitches us all together so that we can handle political, economic, social crises, right? So let's go ahead.
Point of conditions, the President on February 8th issued a memo, and it said, and you already know this, but just for context, it said that it was the policy of this administration to prevent arms transfers that risk facilitating or otherwise contributing to violations of human rights or international humanitarian law. Is firing a missile at people delivering food and killing them not a violation of international humanitarian law?
Well, the Israelis have already admitted that this was a mistake that they made. They're doing an investigation. They'll get to the bottom of this. Let's not get ahead of that.
Pause for a second. Look at this fucker's face. I mean, my God.
Your question presumes, at this very early hour, that it was a deliberate strike, that they knew exactly what they were hitting, that they were hitting aid workers and did it on purpose, and there's no evidence of that. I would also remind you, sir, that We continue to look at incidents as they occur. The State Department has a process in place. And to date, as you and I are speaking, they have not found any incidents where the Israelis have violated international humanitarian law. And lest you think we don't take it seriously, I can assure you that we do. We look at this in real time.
They have never violated international humanitarian law ever in the past 5 to 6 months.
Never.
I'm telling you, the State Department has looked at incidents in the past and has yet to determine that any of those incidents violate international humanitarian law.
Go ahead, Nadia. Thank you, Cody. Mr. Kirby, Israel has killed...
Unreal. Unfucking real. I mean, never violated international law. Never. 6 months. Televised, live stream genocide. Clear as a God-given day on this green earth. He says never. You know, there is a special... Dante Alighieri tells us there's a special place in hell for men like this. The hottest places in hell. Horrifying stuff. We're starting to run over our time here, so I'm going to fast forward some of this. Actually, there is this part here from independent journalists. Says, Israeli military sources, meanwhile, told Haaretz that the attack on the World Central Kitchen convoy was... Oh, we already read that. Sorry. But this part here... from independent journalists on Twitter going through Israeli military documents and stuff says, the Army's procedures state that those who must give the final approval for activities against sensitive targets, such as aid organizations, are senior officers at the ranks of division commander. So what is this? What is this document? This is the IOF, the IDF, the Israeli military, having procedures in place for attacking aid organizations. They have a specific procedure in place, a specific chain of command for breaking international law. And this is not the first time that we have seen clear, rules within the Israeli military structure for violating international law. Case in point being the Hannibal Directive, that we will kill everyone in the area if any of our hostages are taken. That is a fucking war crime. That's killing innocent people. We've seen, it's really crazy to see these sort of things in paper institutionalized, We'll go ahead and fast forward here, guys, to the end of this. Try to keep this video short for you. Jumping in here, guys, I apologize for it not being highlighted, but it says, Washington's willingness to provide arms and diplomatic cover for this situation has led some, including journalist Sam Husseini, to suspect that for parts of the U.S. establishment, the complete destruction of international law may be the actual goal, not a cost of Israel's genocide. While professing to be outraged and heartbroken by Israel's killing of the World Central Kitchen personnel, Biden is not changing his policy of unconditional material support for its slaughter, a blatantly horrific and stupid mistake, one of his senior officials told Political. And then we saw, as this was happening, same day that he comes out and says, I'm having a stern talk to Netanyahu. This is horrifying. This needs to stop. Ceasefire. We've even heard Biden and his department talk about a ceasefire. Then more arms shipments and stuff. And then, of course, we finally saw the U.S. not vote in favor of, but abstain during a vote with its veto in the Security Council for a ceasefire resolution, even though it was incredibly watered down. It says here, the Biden administration is not only gutting the meaning of international law, but also admittedly flawed institutions that are meant to uphold it. After nearly 6 months of genocide in Gaza, Washington finally allowed the UN Security Council to pass a resolution demanding immediate ceasefire. But as the resolution was passed, Linda Thomas Greenfield, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, claimed that it was non-binding. Despite its baselessness, her remark was surely heard in the war rooms of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the Palestinian writer Samar Abadawi observed. Hours after the vote, Palestinians in Gaza reported an uptick in Israeli military attacks. According to Phyllis Bennis, a fellow at the Institute for Policy Studies, when Thomas Greenfield claimed that the council vote was non-binding, she was setting the stage for the U.S. government to violate the UN Charter by refusing to be bound by the resolution's terms. Craig Mokhiber, a former senior UN official, said that the U.S. has shown itself willing to burn down the House, to tear down the entire international legal framework, to defend one genocidal apartheid state, distorting humanitarian law, abrogating the Genocide Convention, and declaring Security Council resolutions non-binding. So again, guys, that is the crux of the matter, really, with that UN vote, and then voting, abstaining, and then having the audacity to say that a UN Security Council vote decree is non-binding. That is a lie. That is not true. So through this article, we have seen all the different ways that Israel and then the U.S. cover for Israel is really harming the very fabric of international law that at least tries to keep us all safe. I mean, it's all we have. We know the UN is a deeply flawed institution. But when the U.S. does this, it is setting the stage for a law where there is no institution or no procedure in place for diplomatic resolution for any of the world's problems, be they political, military, economic, or, of course, climate change related. If the U.S. just pisses all over international law or decrees or resolutions or any of the shit, anytime it's politically expedient for them, we are creating a world where that institution, that body, has zero weight at all, has zero effect. And if we have that, and we're moving towards this period of great power conflict, this period of contradiction where the U.S. is in decline, there are powers, on the rise, and parts of the world are struggling for liberation, and we have these power vacuums that are going to be created, and all this is going to be settled before the dust settles. We're looking at a world where I don't know what kind of horrors can happen if we do not have these institutions to circumnavigate or put laws and parameters around their unfolding, right? But again, guys, that's all I have for you. I apologize if maybe this video is a little discordant or, off. I am getting used to my new setup here. But as always, guys, I love talking the issues with you. Love doing this content with you guys. I'm looking forward to getting back into my routine here. And, as always, guys, it's great hanging out with you. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. You can support me on Patreon at patreon.com/entitlemillennials. You can do that for $1 a month, or you can set me up with a one-time PayPal donation at paypal.me/entitlemillennials. Always appreciate that, guys. As always, great hanging out with you, and I look forward to talking to you all again real soon. Bye-bye for now.
And I know that I don't know. Know anything at all. That I don't. And I know that I don't know. And I know that I don't know anything at all. into the rain. But I know that I don't know, and I know that I don't. Yes, I know